tinggal searching kursus online aja di internet.
Tapi aku mau yang terpercaya dari Australia. Aussie, Down Under, idaman aku itu.
Pas banget, ada loh di Traveloka Experience. Tinggal pilih sesuai minat kamu, semuanya akan ada di Traveloka Experience.
Wah, udah paling bener nih.
Setelah pelatihan, kamu juga akan mendapatkan digital page dari lembaga-lembaga Australia yang bermitra dengan Traveloka.
Dengan dukungan Katalis, meningkatkan keterampilan tidak lagi kenal batas.
Gimana? Udah nemu yang pas belum?
Pas dan tanpa batas.
So today we actually have the opening of the digital literacy training done by Catalyst and Catalyst partner TAFE Queensland and Traveloka and Universitas Ciputra.
Kita mengadakan digital literacy yang memberikan pengetahuan, keterampilan dan juga wawasan tentang keterampilan digital yang dibutuhkan di dalam pengembangan dunia pariwisata, khususnya di Jawa Timur.
And we also hope that there's a kind of engaging interaction whereby audiences or the training participant can share a candid issues in tourism industry, mostly in digital era, and we hope to have a kind of mutual solution and contribution and positive feedback after the program ends.
Menurut saya sudah tidak bisa dipungkiri lagi ya, Australia termasuk salah satu training provider yang terbaik di dunia. Harapan kami ya tetap berlanjut training tersebut, lebih ditingkatkan kualitas dan kuantitasnya.
Hi, my name is Dan Gray and I'm from TAFE Queensland, and I've flown up here to Surabaya here at the Ciputra University to run a digital literacy course. So in the digital literacy course, we are going to be covering a range of topics, including basically digital security, digital ethics, digital marketing and onboarding, as well as a few other topics.
Ya, hari ini sangat seru banget nih. Kemarin lihat kontennya luar biasa.
Kita bisa berbincang dengan bahasa Inggris, jadi melatih juga kita buat belajar bahasa Inggris lebih.
Ini merupakan suatu ajang yang bagus buat kami untuk bisa berjejaring.
By the end of the course, we hope that the students will really get a better understanding of the tools that are available to them and how to use them safely.
Menyala Abang Den!
Menjawab tantangan multidimensional yang dihadapi dunia usaha di tengah disrupsi dan konflik geopolitik membutuhkan sinergi dan kolaborasi kuat antar pengusaha.
Selama lebih dari 70 tahun bertransformasi, APINDO sebagai wadah kolaborasi pengusaha memegang erat 5 nilai Pancasila sebagai fondasi untuk menuju perubahan. Sebagai insan APINDO yang menjadi katalisator utama terhadap isu-isu penting yang mendukung agenda nasional dan internasional, kami terus berupaya mewujudkan iklim usaha yang kondusif, kompetitif, dan berkelanjutan untuk penciptaan lapangan pekerjaan.
Dengan mengembangkan 7 prioritas utama, APINDO terus berkomitmen memberikan pengaruh dan kontribusi yang signifikan, inklusif, serta berkelanjutan bagi roda perekonomian nasional. Dalam upaya mendorong transformasi APINDO untuk Indonesia maju, APINDO berkomitmen untuk mengembangkan 4 program unggulan, yaitu mengembangkan roadmap kebijakan ekonomi untuk panduan strategis pemerintah dalam melanjutkan reformasi struktural, mendorong pertumbuhan ekonomi yang inklusif dengan mendukung peningkatan kinerja UMKM. Mereformasi kualitas SDM nasional sejak dini dengan pencegahan stunting. Dan menerapkan program sertifikasi HR dan IR untuk peningkatan profesionalisme dan kualitas hubungan industrial yang dinamis.
Mari melangkah bersama untuk pengusaha bersatu Indonesia maju.
What is greatness?
It's doing what makes you feel proud. What feels right for right now. You define your greatness.
from some people I've met on social media, Indonesian people who works in aged care nursing and also Philippine nurse. They say the work is amazing, especially when you talk to these elderly people. They're lovely, but also some also have some illness. I think that's a higher prospect of like how you take care of a patient.
So the students are studying Certificate 3 Individual Support Ageing through the University of New England Partnerships. This qualification will provide them with a skill set which will allow them to work in Australia as a personal care worker, or otherwise known as personal care assistant. They will study subjects about communication, about diversity in culture. They will learn about manual handling. They will learn about other specific hot topics within Australia at the moment, such as dementia care and palliative care in our old persons. At the end of the qualification, they will be able to apply for positions as personal care workers in Australia with the support of our teams at UNEP.
And what we found in this process was this first batch of 20 are enthusiastic, they're eager, and they're going to make a fantastic contribution to Australia's aged care system.
Karena ini bagian dari core value dari Binawan juga ya, untuk mempersiapkan ya, menyiapkan sumber daya manusia Indonesia yang handal di bidang kesehatan. Jadi kita juga bisa bukan sekedar menyiapkan mereka dalam hal kompetensi nasional, tapi juga meningkatkan daya saing sumber daya manusia Indonesia di level global.
Sekarang belajar cukup pakai jari loh.
Maksudnya?
Iya, tinggal searching kursus online aja di internet.
Tapi aku mau yang terpercaya dari Australia. Aussie, Down Under, idaman aku itu.
Pas banget, adalah di Traveloka Experience. Tinggal pilih sesuai minat kamu, semuanya akan ada di Traveloka Experience.
Wah, udah paling bener nih.
Setelah pelatihan, kamu juga akan mendapatkan digital page dari lembaga-lembaga Australia yang bermitra dengan Traveloka.
Dengan dukungan Katalis, meningkatkan keterampilan tidak lagi kenal batas.
Gimana? Udah nemu yang pas belum?
Pas dan tanpa batas.
So today we actually have the opening of the digital literacy training done by Katalis and Katalis partner TAFE Queensland and Traveloka and Universitas Ciputra.
Kita mengadakan digital literacy yang memberikan pengetahuan, keterampilan dan juga wawasan tentang keterampilan digital yang dibutuhkan di dalam pengembangan dunia pariwisata, khususnya di Jawa Timur.
And we also hope that there's a kind of engaging interaction whereby audiences or the training participant can share a candid issues in tourism industry, mostly in digital era, and we hope to have a kind of mutual solution and contribution and positive feedback after the program ends.
Menurut saya sudah tidak bisa dipungkiri lagi ya, Australia termasuk salah satu training provider yang terbaik di dunia. Harapan kami ya tetap berlanjut training tersebut, lebih ditingkatkan kualitas dan kuantitasnya.
Hai semuanya, selamat pagi, apa kabar? Saya Clarice Campbell dari Catalyst. A very warm welcome to everyone attending the second webinar in this series of online training sessions held by the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform in collaboration with the Indonesian Employers Association, or APINDO. These training sessions are designed to support Indonesian businesses in building future-ready teams and to introduce the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform. The IA-CEPA platform is an exciting project that was launched in February 2025. To date, the platform has brought together 46 Australian registered training organisations and 130 Indonesian businesses to connect to over 330 different courses. Today's training topic is mental health in the workplace, and it will be presented by Leanne Humphreys from Phoenix, Australia, which is affiliated with the University of Melbourne. Great workplaces start with psychologically safe teams, and great training starts with the right expert. So this is your opportunity to learn from one of the best in the field. Do get your questions and comments ready. We encourage you to use the chat box throughout this webinar. Your comments and questions will be incorporated into the Q&A session towards the end. For translation services and other queries, please also use the chat box. You will find the translation functions at the bottom of your Zoom. Today's session is also being live streamed and recorded and will be available on the Catalyst website and YouTube. So you've heard about it, but what is the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform exactly? This next video explains in more detail.
There have been many partnerships between Australian education providers and Indonesian businesses, both for training in Indonesia and Australia. Now there is an easy way to connect with Australian education providers. It's the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform.
Apa kabar Mbak? Baik, apa kabar? Baik juga. Have a nice day ya Mbak.
Yeah, you too. Jump onto iaskills.org and see hundreds of courses by renowned Australian education providers. It's simple and straightforward. Everything is right there on the platform.
Should I take this to the meeting room?
Yeah, great.
For Indonesian businesses looking for training, there's a wide range of categories according to industry. There are different types of training, including micro-credentials, short courses, or other qualifications. Then, there are options for delivery methods that can suit your business, like virtual, in-person, or a mix of online and in-person training in Indonesia. You can also choose your preferred language, whether in Indonesian or English.
And boom, there it is. There's a couple of training providers offering this type of courses. After you select your course, the training provider will be in touch and you can discuss in detail about the training delivery.
If you haven't found the right course for you, you can request for a course to be designed for your business. The education providers will see it and may respond by sending a proposal or quote. You can then contact them directly. We have over 50 trusted Australian providers featured on the platform. These providers are some of the best vocational training organisations and universities in Australia, all with interest in delivering training in Indonesia.
TAFE Queensland are excited to be part of the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform, or iaskills.org. It's a great initiative that connects TAFE Queensland and other institutions with Indonesian businesses, making it easier to access high-level training. This platform is a game changer, helping us build strong partnerships and opening doors to incredible training opportunities in Indonesia.
We've been working in Indonesia for more than 20 years, and most recently we've been collaborating with Catalyst on some online micro-credentials and short courses to assist with skills development. We're really excited about the launch of the IA Skills Exchange and look forward to making new friends across the Indonesian archipelago. We'll see you there.
Join us today!
Thanks for staying with us. If you have questions about the IASE, do get in touch with us through the details provided in the chat. For now, Leanne Humphreys is ready to deliver the training session. But first, let's get to know Phoenix, Australia. Hi, Leanne, and welcome to the second seminar for this seminar series. You're joining us from Melbourne, I believe. How is it down there?
Well, actually, Phoenix is based in Melbourne, but I'm based in New South Wales in the Blue Mountains. So,
Yeah, just we really like virtual dispersed workforces. So it's a beautiful day in the Blue Mountains today.
Oh, that's really lovely. For those joining online, the Blue Mountains is probably one of the most beautiful parts of Australia. And I think for Leanne, it kind of is highlighting that it's very important to have some blended approaches to work sometimes. So it's really good that you have the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, without further ado, I'll let you introduce Phoenix Australia, and then we can start our training session.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen, Clarice. Won't be a second. Okay. Sorry about this. Don't seem to be able to do that.
We can see the PowerPoint.
Okay. You can see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's not, I'm not able to kind of shift it on. I don't think that's my screen. You've got the slide deck. Okay, so that you've got the slide deck. It's not showing at my end.
Okay. We can see it on the screen, so perhaps you can start, and the team will just change the slides for you.
Terrific. I'll just go through to the acknowledgement of country, if that's okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you. So before I begin, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of place in shaping our work here at Phoenix Australia. So in Australia, it's customary to begin by recognising the traditional custodians of the lands in which we live and work. And I'm speaking to you today really representing two places. The first is the image here of the Alan Gilbert Building at the University of Melbourne, which is where Phoenix is based. This building stands on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. The second image is, as I said, the beautiful Blue Mountains of New South Wales, which is where I'm currently working from, and home to the Darug and Gundungurra people whose custodianship of the land continues today. So as I present, I'm paying my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to land and water and country. If we could move on to the next one. Could we move on to the next slide? Okay, thank you. Okay, so who is Phoenix? Well, Phoenix Australia is a national centre of excellence in post-traumatic mental health, and we're based in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Melbourne. So for 30 years, we've been recognised as a national centre of excellence because of the breadth and the depth of the work that we do, our national and international partnerships, and the impact that we have across multiple sectors. But at the heart of everything we do is research. So we lead original studies to better understand the impacts of trauma and how to prevent or treat trauma-related mental health difficulties. And this includes clinical trials and longitudinal studies, implementation research and service evaluations, covering areas like post-traumatic stress disorder, complex trauma and moral injury. And to ensure that this leads to real-world change, we translate evidence into action through our knowledge translation portfolio, which has three interconnected functions. The first is policy and practice, where we work with businesses and government departments and other organisations across Australia and internationally to design policies and services grounded in the best available evidence. Our education and workforce development portfolio, where we strengthen workforce capability through the development and delivery of high quality trauma-informed tailored training to a wide range of professional sectors, and our clinical services, where we provide evidence-based treatment to individuals affected by trauma through our specialist clinic. So this integrated approach ensures that we're not just kind of generating academic knowledge, we're actually applying it to improve mental health and recovery outcomes at scale. And whether we're training frontline workers or assisting governments or helping a business implement a new model of staff wellbeing, our work's always grounded in evidence and driven by a strong commitment to supporting people affected by trauma. So with that foundation in mind, I just want to touch briefly on what our work has led to. So some of our major achievements that we're really proud of across our 30-year history. Phoenix has a long history of shaping best practice, and one of our most significant contributions has been leading the development and ongoing revision of the Australian guidelines for the prevention and treatment of acute stress disorder, PTSD and complex PTSD. These nationally endorsed guidelines set the standard for evidence-based care, and they underpin much of our broader work in education and clinical innovation and policy development. And they influence how trauma is understood and responded to across sectors. We also lead major trials, including the Restore trial. The Restore trial's Australia's largest PTSD treatment study for veterans and military personnel. And the trial shows that delivering a particular kind of treatment called prolonged exposure therapy in a more intensive and massed format is more effective than traditional methods of treatment for this condition. And it's recognised as one of the NH and MRC's 10 of the best research projects. So it's having a real world impact by improving accessibility of really effective treatment to trauma-exposed workforces. Our digital capacity building includes creation of something called the Disaster Mental Health Hub, which was funded by the Australian government. And this hub has provided free resources and training to over 120,000 users, supporting disaster-impacted communities and those working with them. And that particular project, we were really proud to receive the National Resilient Australia Award for that particular work. And that work supported also more than 1,800 frontline workers in the aftermath of our Black Summer bushfires. Another initiative for us is the Trauma and Aged Care Hub. So this was developed in response to COVID-19, the impacts of COVID-19 and a royal commission that we had into aged care. The hub's reached over 10,000 aged care facilities and supports trauma-informed care for residents and staff, including those who've experienced grief and loss and the long-term effects of trauma. Our education and workforce development programs reach across sectors and settings, and in the past 5 years alone, we've had over 20,000 learners from more than 600 organisations participate in our training. These include tailored programs in psychological first aid, vicarious trauma and trauma-informed care, delivered through online training, face-to-face workshops and blended approaches. And finally, we're really proud to contribute to the global conversation. So Phoenix Australia plays a leadership role in international collaborations, including co-chairing the Five Eyes Mental Health Research and Innovation Collaboration. And we work through an organisation called the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. So our work supports international progress on complex trauma issues, including PTSD, moral injury and healthcare worker wellbeing. But together, taken together, these initiatives demonstrate the breadth of some of the work that we do at Phoenix. So from setting national standards to delivering frontline care, influencing policy and practice on a global scale. Now that you've heard a little bit about Phoenix, Clarice, are you comfortable with me telling people a little bit about myself?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist with over 30 years experience in trauma-related mental health, and I currently lead the education and workforce development portfolio at Phoenix, where I oversee the development delivery of training programs designed to build trauma-informed capability. So much of my clinical background's focused on working with individual clients affected by trauma, particularly using evidence-based and trauma-focused therapies. So I have a strong interest now in work-integrated learning, continuing professional development, and how online and blended approaches to education can better support individuals across their professional lifespan. So these days, my role focuses on translating research into practical educational initiatives that make sure workforces have access to the knowledge and skills they need to support others effectively. So thank you for inviting me to be present today, and I'm really pleased to be here to talk about mental health in the workplace. Thanks, Clarice.
Thanks so much, Leanne. Well, I think without further ado, perhaps we can just jump straight into it. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, we can accept questions during the session. If people have them while Leanne is speaking, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So yeah, over to you to start the training.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to outline what we'll be covering today. First, we'll talk about mental health in the workplace and why it is actually a workplace issue and not just a personal one. We'll dive a little deeper into the impacts of traumatic events on mental health, and we'll explore how these particular challenges show up at work and you know, why it matters to pay attention to them. Then I'll introduce the core principles of something called trauma-informed practice, which is a useful framework for thinking about how organisations can respond in ways that support staff who've experienced trauma. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about how Phoenix Australia can support organisations to apply these principles in their unique context. So the presentation today isn't about giving you all of the answers, but it's really just about starting a conversation and pointing to the kinds of guidance and training and policy support that are available if you would like to take that next step. So let's start by talking briefly about what we actually mean by the term mental health. So mental health refers to how we think and feel and behave, and it's often misunderstood as simply the absence of mental illness, but the World Health Organization offers a much broader and more helpful definition. They describe mental health as a state of well-being, and one in which a person can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and contribute to their community. And defined this way, it implies that our mental health exists on a continuum. So at one end of the continuum are people who are coping well or thriving, they feel positive and engaged, they manage the normal ups and downs of life, and they function effectively in their personal and professional roles. Moving along the continuum, though, some people might be experiencing some challenges. They might be feeling stressed, overwhelmed or fatigued, or even kind of disconnected, but not to the extent that they'd meet the criteria for a mental health diagnosis. Further along is a point that we might describe as at risk. So this is where people can be experiencing more persistent or noticeable symptoms. It's like ongoing stress or disrupted sleep or mood changes or social withdrawal. And these signs can indicate that a person's mental health is declining, and without support, they may be at risk of developing a diagnosable condition. At the far end of the spectrum, individuals experiencing significant mental health difficulties. So this can include conditions like depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and these interfere with day-to-day functioning and well-being. And they're not just temporary difficulties, and very often people with these conditions will benefit from professional support. I think the important thing is that this continuum can apply to all of us. So just like we fluctuate in our physical health across our lifespan, our mental health can shift over time too. And depending on life events or work pressures, what's happening in our relationships and families, or what's happening in the world around us. So why think about mental health on a continuum? Well, it reminds us that mental health is not just a matter of being well or unwell. People can move in either direction. The continuum reminds us that there are things that we can do as individuals and as workplaces to help people stay well or to support those who are struggling to move towards that thriving end of the continuum. So in the workplace, some of the most common mental health conditions are the ones that we see listed here on the slide. Starting with anxiety disorders, these are some of the most frequently diagnosed mental health conditions in Australia, and they'll include conditions like generalised anxiety, panic disorder, or social anxiety. And at work, these conditions can show up in lots of different ways. You know, maybe someone's constantly feeling on edge. They might be avoiding certain tasks. They might find it hard to concentrate. They might be overly worried about their performance or interpersonal interactions. Work stresses can trigger anxiety, but also anxiety can develop independently of anything that's happening in the workplace, but they can certainly be made worse by a workplace environment that is not psychologically safe. Next is depression, and depression goes beyond just feeling down. It's persistent low mood, loss of motivation or interest. It can be feelings of fatigue, difficulty thinking clearly. People with depression might withdraw from colleagues, they might take more sick leave, they can appear disengaged, and I guess unsurprisingly, it's one of the leading causes of lost productivity in the workplace. Next, we have post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, and while in our thinking for a lot of us, it's often associated with combat or the experience of disasters like natural disasters, we do see PTSD occurring in a wide range of workforces, so healthcare and emergency services, for example. Essentially, PTSD can develop after someone personally experiences or witnesses a traumatic event. So symptoms can include nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive images, hypervigilance or feeling really keyed up and on edge, or even just emotional numbness. And even when people are really highly competent in their job, PTSD can affect their functioning over time if left unaddressed. And finally, another common presentation is substance use disorders. So people might use alcohol or other substances to cope with stress or trauma. Substance use disorders are therefore really commonly co-occurring with anxiety and depression or PTSD. And in the workplace, it can show up in a number of different ways. It might look like frequent lateness or missed deadlines, erratic behaviour, or even difficulty concentrating. But together, these conditions account for a really significant proportion of mental health impacts in the workplace. Now, of course, the data we've just looked at reflects the general population, but it's also important to remember that some professions face a much higher risk of developing mental health conditions. And one of the clearest examples of this is the emergency services sector. So these are roles where exposure to trauma, crises, high pressure, high demand situations is part of the job. So we could think of police, paramedics, firefighters. They're often dealing with life-threatening events, really highly distressed individuals and crises and unpredictable environments. So, for example, a major national study here in Australia led by an organisation called Beyond Blue found that emergency services workers are twice as likely as the general population to experience high psychological distress, whereby more than 1 in 3 report having been diagnosed with a mental health condition during their career. And even though we see these higher rates of PTSD, anxiety and depression in this group, many still don't seek support. And often that's because of stigma or workplace culture that discourages expressions of or appearances of anything that looks like weakness or vulnerability. And just as we see elevated risks among emergency services workers, the same is true for many healthcare professionals, for example. So in fact, people working in healthcare face really similar sets of pressures, even often in different form, but with just as much impact. So they're frequently exposed to trauma, the suffering of others and death, and often while working under really intense time constraints and within really stretched, overburdened systems. And this can lead to high rates of psychological distress or burnout, or even something called moral injury. So the distress that arises when someone feels forced to act in ways that go against their professional or ethical values. And like many others, healthcare staff often face barriers to help seeking. So again, stigma around mental health, concerns about professional repercussions, perhaps, or simply just the lack of time or energy to access support. So other professions are also at increased risk of developing mental health conditions, and a good example of this is the legal profession. So while legal professionals might not be routinely exposed to the same kinds of situations that first responders or healthcare professionals are, those in the legal professions face other really well-documented stressors like long hours, demanding workloads, sometimes really adversarial environments, and high performance expectations. There's also a strong culture of stoicism in many legal workplaces. And again, this can discourage help seeking and reinforce stigma around mental health concerns. And there's emerging research that shows that this group are also at increased risk of something called vicarious trauma. And this is where people are regularly exposed to clients' accounts of violence and abuse or persecution, or where they might be reviewing graphic evidence as part of their work. And so these events, these traumatic exposures are not necessarily happening directly to them, but they are exposed indirectly. And over time, these repeated exposures to distressing stories or images can have a cumulative impact on mental health and well-being. So it's not surprising then that studies are starting to show that nearly half of Australian lawyers are experiencing moderate to severe psychological distress with elevated rates of burnout and depression and anxiety and problematic alcohol abuse. So I guess a common question that we are faced with at Phoenix is, why should businesses prioritise mental health in the workplace? And the short answer is it's because it's already affecting you, whether you realise it or not. So mental health issues are among the most common and costly challenges in today's workplaces. So conditions like the ones I've described affect a really significant proportion of the workforce. So according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2023, 1 in 5 Australians experience a mental health condition each year. But we think this figure's a likely underestimate of the true scale of the issue. So many people don't disclose their mental health struggles, often due to fear of stigma or misunderstanding, and many are even less likely to discuss these issues in the workplace. And as a result, the signs of those mental health conditions can be easy to miss or misinterpret. They often don't necessarily show up through big, dramatic experiences or breakdowns, but gradually. So in increasing or creeping patterns of absenteeism, presenteeism, or even rising tensions within teams. And the impacts are considerable. Mental health conditions are now one of the leading causes of long-term workplace absence in Australia. And stress-related workers' compensation claims alone cost Australian businesses more than $10 billion each year. But of course, these challenges aren't unique to Australia. Mental health in the workplace is a growing concern right across our region. So if we start with Indonesia, recent data shows that almost 1 in 5 workers experience mental health challenges. And the economic cost is staggering. So with an estimated $13 billion lost each year through reduced productivity and absenteeism. In Malaysia, a recent national health survey found that nearly 30% of adults are experiencing symptoms of a mental health condition. But only 1 in 5 of these folks are receiving professional help. And again, it appears that the gap is partly due to stigma, but it could also be limited access and awareness, especially in workplace settings. And in South Korea, mental illness affects a large proportion of the population over the course of their lives. And for young people in particular, the situation is especially concerning as suicide remains the leading cause of death amongst those aged 9 to 24. But I guess across all of these countries, we're also seeing that some job sectors are more heavily impacted than others. So Indonesia, for example, psychological distress is particularly elevated amongst labourers and drivers and domestic workers. And these are roles where access to support can be limited and working conditions can be especially tough. So I guess what the research is kind of context differ. There's the message is consistent. Mental health issues are common and they're costly and not always well supported at work. Okay, a little pause there before I move on to the next section. Is that an opportunity for a question, Clarice? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, we can answer.
Or we can wait to the end. I know you did say the end. I don't mind.
Yeah, maybe let's just wait till the end. Okay. There might be some repeat questions throughout. So
good point. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Okay. Okay. So far we've been looking at mental health in the workplace more broadly, including issues like anxiety and depression and substance use and how they affect individuals and workplaces. But I guess now what we're going to do is focus in on one particular area of mental health that's especially relevant in the modern workplace and is really central to the work we do at Phoenix Australia, and that's trauma. But when we use the word trauma, it's important to be clear about what we mean. And what seems to happen in everyday language now is that we often say, oh, that was really traumatic to describe a difficult event. But in mental health terms, most accurately, trauma doesn't refer to the event itself, it refers to the impact. Most accurately, trauma is the psychological or the emotional injury that can occur when someone is exposed to a situation that overwhelms their capacity to cope. And these events can either be sudden or prolonged, but essentially they shake a person's sense of safety or predictability. And Safe Work Australia says that something is more likely to be traumatic when it's unexpected, seems uncontrollable, or is caused by intentional cruelty. And whether it's a one-off incident or something that builds over time, this means that trauma is best understood not as the event, but as the wound that's left behind. Interestingly, though, not every difficult experience leads to a traumatic wound. And what feels traumatic to one person might not have the same impact on someone else. And that's why it's helpful to use the term potentially traumatic events or PTEs. And these are events that certainly carry an increased risk of overwhelming someone's capacity to cope. But whether or not a person is traumatized by the experience depends on a range of things. So it can depend on the nature and the magnitude of the event. It can depend on their past experiences, their own coping strategies, but really crucially, the research tells us that the support available to them during the trauma and after is really helpful in reducing the risk of an event being experienced as traumatizing. So on the list here, there are a number of examples that you might recognise. A serious workplace accident, for instance, or being involved in or witnessing a violent incident. And in Australia, we're particularly prone to natural disasters like drought and floods and bushfires. So again, while these events don't always lead to trauma, they certainly have an increased risk or potential to do that. And we know these kinds of events are relatively common. So in Australia, the research is very consistently telling us that up to 75% of adults will experience at least one potentially traumatic event in their lifetime, and most will experience two or more. And more than 2/3 of people who have experienced a potentially traumatic event will do so by the age of 16. So we know that these events, they're not rare, they're not exceptional experiences, and they're really part of everyday life for many people. We also know that trauma, as we've just noticed, that trauma doesn't affect everyone in the same way, but not all groups are impacted equally. Some individuals and communities actually carry a disproportionate burden. And that means, for example, people experiencing homelessness or those living with serious mental health conditions are at much higher risk of both exposure to trauma, but have less access to the resources that will help them recover. Marginalised groups also face added risks, so they can experience discrimination and exclusion, isolation, or other forms of adversity that increase both exposure to and impact of trauma over time. And I guess the important message is that in the workplace, this means that staff can be bringing a whole range of unseen experiences with them. So past or even ongoing trauma can affect how they show up at work, how they relate to others, and how they cope with the usual work-related stressors. I guess the other thing to be aware of is that potentially traumatic events, and we've kind of already hinted at this when we talked about the legal profession, but potentially traumatic events aren't always experienced firsthand. So that is, they can be experienced directly or indirectly, but both can have significant effects on mental health. So directly experienced potentially traumatic events are situations where a person experiences something themselves. So something threatens their life or safety, causes them serious injury, or might involve sexual violence, for example. So these are really high impact events that can trigger a strong fear response. So for example, a healthcare worker might be physically assaulted by a patient, or a construction worker might be involved in a near fatal accident. Employees might be injured during a natural disaster like a flood or an earthquake that hits outside of work hours. These are intense, frightening experiences that can leave really lasting psychological wounds. But PTEs can also be experienced indirectly, like when a person's exposed to the trauma of others. So this can involve witnessing distressing events or repeatedly hearing about them through someone else's story in the course of your job. So, for example, that legal staff might be reviewing disturbing crime scene photos. Social workers might hear repeated accounts of domestic violence, or even insurance industry or healthcare administrators indirectly experience PTEs from reading detailed reports of accidents. But importantly, the important message is that both direct and indirect trauma can have serious impact, especially when exposure is repeated over time without the appropriate supports. And in some industries, like healthcare, social services, emergency services, or the law, that indirect trauma can just be a routine part of the job. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples of how trauma-related mental health difficulties might actually present themselves in the workplace. Let's start with Stav. Stav's a paramedic with 10 years experience. He regularly witnesses distressing scenes, including severe accidents, life-threatening injuries and deaths. And in this case, after attending a particularly distressing call involving a child, he began experiencing intrusive memories of that event, difficulty sleeping, and he started to withdraw from colleagues and getting to the point of avoiding certain jobs. He also struggles with low mood and poor concentration. So even though the incident is in the past, we can see that the psychological effects are staying with him. Emma works in insurance. She supports people who've been through terrible losses like fires, floods, serious injury, and even death of family or loved ones. So she's on the phone every day with people in distress, and sometimes that distress manifests as anger and frustration and overwhelm, and it's directed directly at Emma. And over time, the emotional toll has started to wear her down. She's finding herself anxious before picking up the phone. She's starting to have struggling to sleep at night. She's feeling drained after each shift and not looking forward to coming to work. She's also noticed that she's getting irritable with her teammates and having difficulty concentrating. So we can see that Emma hasn't experienced the traumatic events directly, but she's repeatedly being exposed to the trauma of others over and over again. Nico's a factory supervisor, and he wasn't expecting trauma to be a significant part of his job, but one day a serious machinery accident occurred and one of his team members was critically injured. Nico had to manage the emergency response, had to call for help, he supported his team, he managed the immediate aftermath, but since then he's been having flashbacks, difficulty sleeping, and he feels really nervous every time he walks out onto the factory floor. So this is a situation where we can see that trauma is not necessarily a regular part of somebody's job, but it's still having a major impact. So even one single, unexpected, high-stress incident can affect someone's mental health. And here's Hero. Hero's an office worker, and his job isn't particularly high risk, but outside of work, he experienced a traumatic event when his home and community were devastated by severe flooding. And although he returned to work quickly, he's found it really difficult to focus. He's easily overwhelmed, and he becomes very anxious when the weather changes. And this kind of personal trauma can deeply impact somebody's emotional well-being, therefore their capacity to function at work. So it's important to remember we don't leave our life experiences at the door. What happens outside of work, like natural disasters or car accidents or family violence, can have a big effect on how someone performs in the workplace. And these experiences can have both psychological and behavioural impacts for the people concerned. So the psychological impacts are experienced within the person themselves, and they can be short-term responses like feeling overwhelmed or emotionally flat or more easily upset than usual. And they're common and understandable reactions that most people will experience at some point following a difficult event. And they can range in severity and duration. So from mild, short-lived distress to the mental health conditions that we spoke about earlier. But we might also see a range of changes in workplace behaviour. For example, someone might find it hard to stay organised or withdraw from team conversations or stop contributing in the ways that they normally would. They might be engaging more in conflict or tension with workmates. So these are behavioural changes, not necessarily diagnoses, but they can still have an impact both for the individual and for the team around them. And when these issues aren't effectively addressed, we can see some really common consequences in the workplace. And one of the most immediate effects is increased absenteeism. So we know that mental health challenges, including those relating to trauma, are really a major driver of sick leave. Research shows that without workplace support, people are much more likely to take extended time off. Then there's the issue of productivity. When people are struggling with depression or anxiety or traumatic stress reactions, they can be physically present, but not performing at their usual level. So the World Health Organization estimated in 2022 that depression and anxiety alone cost the global economy around $1 trillion each year in lost productivity. We also see when these issues are not well managed, we see effects in terms of staff turnover. So in workplaces where trauma exposure is common and support is lacking, staff are much more likely to leave. They seek out roles that feel safer and more manageable, and that for workplaces, that constant churn adds to recruitment and training costs. So the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that trauma-prone workplaces consistently experience higher turnover. Unaddressed trauma also contributes to more workers' compensation claims. So Safe Work Australia data shows that employees dealing with mental health issues, including trauma, lose up to 4 times more work time than those with physical injuries or illnesses. And of course, team dynamics can also deteriorate. So exposure to trauma can heighten conflict, reduce trust, and affect how teams work together. And finally, there's burnout. Repeated exposure to workplace trauma, high demands, lack of support creates the perfect conditions for burnout. And the CDC reports that 46% of healthcare workers are experiencing burnout right now. So those figures are more than likely mirrored in other high pressure sectors. So I guess, across all of these indicators, the message is clear. If we ignore the impact of trauma in the workplaces, the consequences build up quickly, not only in terms of personal cost for individuals, but for organisations as well. Okay, now that we've looked at trauma and how it can affect people and organisations, let's turn our attention to recovery and, importantly, what helps recovery happen. Recovery from trauma is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and people do respond in different ways. But over the years, research has helped us identify some common recovery pathways. So first, there's the resilience pathway, and that's the yellow line across the top there. This describes people who manage to maintain stable psychological functioning. They show very few outward signs of distress even after trauma. It doesn't mean they're not affected, but it means that they're able to draw on their own coping strategies and resources and the support systems around them to help them adapt. Then we have the recovery pathway, which is the purple one, the dipping down and up again. These are folks who experience significant mental health difficulties along with disruption to their daily functioning, but over time, and it's usually around a couple of months, they return to their healthier levels of functioning. Then we have the delayed pathway, and this is kind of fascinating. This refers to people who initially appear to cope well, but later, and sometimes it's months or even years later, they begin to experience distress. So this is a delayed onset of symptoms that really can catch people by surprise, especially if they or the workplace believe the danger's past, everything should be back to normal, but typically there's an event that occurs that reactivates symptoms from an event that they felt that they had previously come to terms with. Then finally, there's the persistent pathway. Now, in these cases, people continue to experience more serious and lasting mental health challenges, like the ones that we've mentioned. They can struggle with depression, anxiety, PTSD or substance use, and their relationships and work life can be significantly affected. And very often, people who are experiencing persistent mental health difficulties need more structured support or professional help to recover. It's important to recognise that people are more likely to recover well when they have the right personal knowledge and skills to draw on and effective supports around them. So this is where mental health literacy, personal coping skills, and really importantly, supportive personal and professional networks make a real difference. So when workplaces can recognise signs of distress, respond in helpful ways, and offer clear pathways to further support, recovery becomes much more achievable. Okay. So now that we've explored how trauma can affect individuals and the workplace, let's have a look at what organisations can do in response. And one effective approach is to work towards becoming a trauma-informed organisation. And this means recognising that trauma is common, it's often not visible, and that anyone from frontline workers to senior leadership can be affected. And the aim with trauma-informed practice is to foster a work environment where staff feel safe and supported and equipped to recognise and respond to signs of distress in themselves and others. So being a trauma-informed workplace involves more than a single initiative. It requires ongoing commitment to training, changes in leadership practices and policies, and the building of a shared understanding across all levels of an organisation. It's not solely the responsibility of HR or wellbeing teams. It's a whole of organisation effort. And the principles of trauma-informed practice provide a practical framework to guide this transformation. So there's no single model, but these principles help shape respectful, inclusive and safe workplaces. So let's have a look at what those principles are. Okay, so how each of these principles is applied in your unique workplace is going to vary. But the first principle involves being trauma aware. So this means understanding some of the things that we've already touched on, that trauma is common and that many of the people we work with, including our colleagues, may have experienced it. But when we're attuned to the signs and the impacts of trauma, we can adjust our behaviour in ways that support safety and well-being instead of unintentionally doing harm. It's also important to recognise that trauma and healing are shaped by culture. A culturally responsive approach asks us to respect cultural identity, to appreciate different worldviews, and to adapt our practices so that they're inclusive and meaningful across a range of communities. Another principle is about giving people choice and control. That sense of autonomy can be especially important after trauma, where the event, the potentially traumatic event, has taken away choice and control. So in the workplace, it might look like involving staff in decision making, offering flexibility in how and where people work, creating an environment where people can speak up and set some boundaries. But it can also be central to all of this is really important to hold a belief in recovery. So being trauma-informed doesn't mean downplaying what someone's been through, but it does mean recognising their strengths and supporting their capacity to heal and move forward in ways that are meaningful to them. Supportive relationships matter too, so connection, facilitating connections helps people recover. So in trauma-informed workplaces, we try to foster a sense of belonging. We encourage peer support and teamwork, and we make sure that people know where to turn to if they need extra help. We also put a strong focus on strengths. Instead of just looking at what someone is finding hard, we try to recognise what they bring, what their strengths are. That helps people feel valued, and it builds a more positive and respectful workplace culture. And finally, we work on building safety and trust. So that includes being clear and consistent in how we communicate, showing respect in our actions, and thinking carefully about how we create physically and psychologically safe environments for everyone. So let's revisit our workers and look at how trauma-informed practice might operate in each situation. So you remember Stav. After responding to that distressing call with the child, his manager recognised the impact that it had on him. And rather than pushing him to resume full duties straight away, Stav was offered more manageable shifts and roles where he felt more comfortable. So his team leader checked in on him regularly, created the opportunity for honest conversations, and reinforced that it was okay to take the time he needed. And so here, just with that very simple response, we can see a number of trauma-informed practice principles in place. So it's creating safety, it's supporting choice and control, it's maintaining connection, but it's really believing in recovery as well. And all of those together help Stav stay engaged at work while beginning to recover. We'll remember too that Emma was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the volume and the emotional intensity of client calls. So rather than dictating changes, her manager sat down with her to explore what she thought might be helpful. So Emma herself suggested rotating high intensity cases amongst team members, which was trialled and found to be effective. She was also supported to block time for admin between the calls, kind of which gave her a space to decompress. So by offering choice and control, respecting her perspective, her workplace helped her regain that sense of control and reduced her risk of developing burnout. Following the machinery accident, Nico experienced flashbacks and anxieties, trouble concentrating, and his manager recognised that these were common signs of trauma, made space for conversation with him about how he was coping. He was given choice about stepping back temporarily from the factory floor. He took on adjusted duties for a while as he was recovering. The manager checked in regularly with him, which gave him a sense of support. So we can see there's the principles of trauma awareness and offering practical support in ways that really supported Nico's recovery, while still maintaining a sense of competence in the workplace. So it's trauma awareness, it's choice and control, it's building safety and trust. And Hero, when Hero returned to work, obviously we remember that he had lost his home and community in a severe flood. His manager connected him with a peer support group formed after similar events and encouraged ongoing conversations about how he was coping. He was also paired with a trusted colleague for informal check-ins and was supported to gradually adjust his workload. So these actions helped him feel connected and valued and hopeful about his capacity to recover. And it really just supported the belief that things can get better with time and support. So these examples show that being a trauma-informed organisation doesn't require dramatic or complex interventions. It often involves simple, practical steps that reflect an understanding of trauma and the principles of trauma-informed practice adapted to the particular individual workplace contexts. So let's talk about what trauma-informed practice might actually mean in terms of benefits. So for we'll start with benefits for employees. When an organisation adopts a trauma-informed approach, it really sends a strong message to staff that their well-being is a priority. People feel safer and more supported. That helps them feel more confident at work. It means that they're more likely to speak up when something isn't right, whether it's about their own mental health or about something they're seeing in the workplace and that might be impacting their colleagues. Job satisfaction can be boosted, engagement, as can engagement and productivity. With regards to managers, well, managers are really central to the success of trauma-informed practice. When managers are trained in trauma-informed approaches, they're more likely to spot when someone on their team is struggling. They are the ones in the best position to do that. And more importantly, they know how to respond. So calmly, with empathy, and in ways that connect to the right supports. Managers often set the tone. When they're modelling openness and care, it creates an environment where others feel comfortable about being honest and asking for help when it's needed. At the organisational level, the benefits can be even broader. A trauma-informed workplace tends to have stronger team dynamics, better communication, and greater staff retention. So when staff feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to stay, to contribute, and to grow and develop in their roles. Organisations that prioritise mental health are increasingly seen as employers of choice. So that matters not just for recruitment, but for reputation. Being known as a responsible and supportive workplace gives an organisation a competitive edge, especially in sectors where talent is hard to find or keep. And for organisations, what does this mean in terms of the financial bottom line? Adopting trauma-informed practice isn't just ethically sound, it's a strategic business decision. So supportive trauma-informed approaches make good business sense. They can reduce the turnover, as we've mentioned, lower the number of psychological injury claims made by employees, but also, there's measurable financial returns. Safe Work New South Wales, for example, reviewed a range of targeted mental health programs like resilience training, mental health literacy sessions, stress management initiatives, and they found a return of between $1.50 and $4 for every dollar invested. And that range really depends on the program type, how it's delivered, how well it's integrated into health and wellbeing frameworks more consistently within the workplace. Separately, a major report by PricewaterhouseCoopers for the National Mental Health Commission looked at the benefits of cultivating mentally healthy workplaces overall. And that's more than just the training programs that we just mentioned. This includes policies, leadership behaviours, culture, and how the organisation as a whole supports wellbeing. And they found that organisations that take this broader approach see an average return of $2.30 for every dollar spent. So whether you're investing in targeted education or broader trauma-informed strategies, the payoff is increasingly clear, not just in terms of staff wellbeing, but in real business outcomes. So now that we've explored what it means to be a trauma-informed organisation and the principles that underpin that approach, I just want to briefly finish up by sharing how Phoenix Australia can support you by putting those ideas into practice. So we work, as I've said, with a range of organisations, both in Australia and internationally, to help them make meaningful, sustainable steps towards becoming trauma-informed. And the work that we do takes two broad forms. So first, we offer policy and practice support. So in terms of this, our teams help organisations develop targeted mental health strategies, especially for those organisations where staff are frequently exposed to trauma, distressing material, or really high pressure environments. So there we help organisations build or refine trauma management frameworks, structures that guide how you prevent harm, intervene early, and support recovery when traumatic events do occur. We can benchmark current policies against best practice standards, both internationally and within industries. And we help with practical implementation too. So we can write policy documents and help organisations embed those changes in real actionable ways. And we also have evaluation implementation around that. So it's really important to measure the impact of efforts, to adapt where needed, and for you to be confident that investments are having a positive effect. And finally, because we sit at that intersection of research and practice, we can provide advice around grounded in latest evidence and undertake bespoke research to help organisations better understand the unique challenges facing particular workforces. And the second key way that Phoenix can support organisations is through education, and this is obviously a key aspect of what we're talking about here in terms of the IA Exchange initiative. A core part of being trauma-informed is raising awareness across an organisation, and this means making sure staff at all levels have a basic understanding of how trauma can affect people at work, what the signs might be, and what could be done to support wellbeing. So we work with organisations to help them identify the most suitable learning options for their workforces. So this might mean short introductory courses for all staff to build foundational knowledge, or more advanced level courses for those in leadership or support roles who need deeper understanding or more specific skills. So it's about providing content that really fits a team's needs. It has to be accessible and practical and relevant to day-to-day work. So when it's done well, education's not only about building capability, it's about fostering a shared language and an approach across an organisation so that all staff feel more equipped, more connected, and better supported. And on the list here, we've got just a few of our courses that are available through the IA Exchange, and obviously they're the link that you can click on if you'd like to have a look at those courses. Okay, so in summary, today we've explored the presence and impact of mental health in the workplace, with a particular focus on trauma and how it can affect individuals, teams and organisations, and we've deepened an understanding of trauma's role in shaping staff wellbeing, and considered how adopting trauma-informed principles can foster a more supportive, psychologically healthy work environment. And then finally, we touched very briefly on two broad approaches that organisations can take to support them becoming trauma-informed organisations, and that's through policy and service implementation initiatives and trauma-informed education, both together to embed trauma-informed practice across all levels of the workplace. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Leanne. So now we have some time left to explore the very many questions that have been submitted through the chat box. I think this is a really interesting conversation for us to have, because we have representatives from a very vast array of different workplaces, people in healthcare, in agriculture, in finance. So all of the different examples that you have provided will be relevant to somebody here. And as you have mentioned, obviously, trauma is actually very common, whether it's happening in the workplace or, in their personal life, and then that's being sort of brought into the workplace. It's something that we should all be more aware of. So I'll jump straight into it. And I would actually like to ask if some respondents could turn on their cameras. So I'm actually going to ask Ardantia Shareza if he could turn on his video to actually ask the question, because I think you have put in a couple of different comments, and you work in the healthcare space, so I think there's important context that you would like to provide. So are we able to bring him online?
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen, Clarice?
Oh, yeah. Yes, you can stop sharing your screen. That's okay. So is it possible to bring Ardantiasha Reza on to the screen? If not, I will ask the question.
Okay. I'm so
yeah.
sorry. I'm not ready to be off on cam, but
That's okay.
I
We can
can.
hear you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the opportunity. So the questions is about this corporate wellness. Yeah, this is a lot of questions regarding the issue of productivity. Yeah. So in your case, I would like to hear examples of how in Australia can address these issues in corporate. Yeah, I mean, like we still vaguely understand how to design this into corporates. So because we know there are issues also somehow coming from the inside of the organization itself. So the managements and so on. It's not always the nature of the job, but also coming from the top leaders of the companies, directions and everything that needs to be in place. So yeah, I'd like to hear more of cases that you've done in Australia, how you deal with that if actually the issues is about the organization itself. But it's getting more complex when when that's what happens. Yeah, because if it's only about the nature of the job, as you examples about certain events or certain trauma, and then we can arrange of series of sessions with the respected employees. But if this is more solid and fundamental issues in the organization, how do you do it? Yeah, I think that's basically it. Thank you.
Yes, Dansha, that's a such a good and insightful question, and I think it's one of the most important things to get right first. So in organisations that we've worked with, and just by way of background, in Australia, we've had a Royal Commission into Aged Care, where investigating kind of systemic failures in provision of aged care services to the point where a Royal Commission was called. And so cultural difficulties, problems across organisations and the industry, really impacting on the quality of the service that aged care residents and families were receiving. And I guess what we would say is, in terms of trauma-informed practice, here we wouldn't be starting or recommend necessarily starting with training for individual workers when they are in an environment that is unhelpful and unhealthy culturally. So when we're talking about the implementation of trauma-informed practice in those settings, we often will start with working with senior management to start implementing and exploring some of those systemic kinds of issues, the funding issues, the attitudinal issues, and look at that before we even start then trickling down to and looking at training for middle management and key people, and getting that in place before we then start looking at the training that we might be offering individual workers. So, if you're in an organisation that has policy difficulties or funding difficulties or insufficient resourcing, no amount of individual training or change at the level of the individual frontline worker is going to actually shift the problem. So for us, we kind of think about what can we kind of flip thinking about traditionally where we offer our training first, and we start with engaging at those higher levels. Unless change happens there, it's not going to change elsewhere. And so that's often at that policy. Let's review the organisation's policies against best practice and what does it mean. How do we, so for examples about how that might be implemented will vary from organisation to organisation, but we have, we have a self-assessment tool, for example, where organisations can self-assess against benchmarks to determine how trauma-informed they are in terms of their policies and overall practices. And that can be a confronting and difficult thing for organisations to do. Often organisations are feeling like they're doing the best that they know how, and to be confronted with the idea that they are inadvertently not doing that, it can be deeply upsetting for many. But, there are a range of things like a trauma-informed self-assessment. Organisations sometimes will engage with us to review all of their standard policy, health and wellbeing documents, to against best practice and give them advice about what they need to do next. We then might have workshops and training days with senior management, because unless there's that senior management buy-in, we're not going to get the change that ultimately trickles down to improved services for service users or clients or staff. So does that help, Adancha? Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, sort of. Yes, thank you, but of course, I think this is too short to discuss here, because this is really an important issue for Indonesia, which is would like to learn more from your cases, and I guess I would look forward if there's any more deeper sessions about how to design or how to manage this kind of issue in our corporate cultures.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Adancha?
Sure.
Your comments kind of tapping into one of the things that we say to organisations, and that is that becoming a trauma-informed organisation is the whole of organisation commitment, and it's not just a one-off event. It's something that organisations engage in over years sometimes to get to the place that they need to get to, ideally.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And as mentioned, this is a very long process. It starts from firstly having these conversations and then considering policies that need to be in place, all the way down to, having conversations with employees who potentially have had traumatic experiences. So we have a few questions and comments actually in the chat from Bambang Sumanjaya from EMC Healthcare. Bambang, I don't know if you're able to turn on your audio and video. If not, I can read your question. But firstly, we will see if you're available. Maybe not. That's okay. So he has put into the chat. So he's also working in healthcare, and he's a HR representative within his organization. And there are over 3,200 employees in this workplace. So it's a very large workplace. He says 60% of whom are women, and 50% are nurses.
Saya bisa join, Pak.
Oh yeah, okay, good. Hello, sorry.
Hi,
Over to you.
Silakan. Hi, Clarice and Lian. Thank you for the opportunity.
Terima kasih atas kesempatannya.
Can you listen to my voice?
Yes.
Okay,
there is
can
a
you
slight
hear me?
echo because I think the translation service is on, but that's okay.
Penerjemahannya itu terdengar.
Okay.
Jadi mungkin bisa dimatikan dari yang penerjemahannya.
Okay, let me try. There is something. Okay, hoping the echo is still there.
sudah bisa.
Okay. I just give a brief
Saya
background.
ingin memberikan latar belakang singkat.
I'm
Masih
in.
terdengar Pak suara penerjemah?
Yeah, so sorry.
That's okay. There should be a button at the bottom of the Zoom, I think, where you can disable
Di mana bisa
the translation.
Yeah, because I'm in the middle of the meeting, so I'm using
di tengah-tengah.
in the screen, big screen.
Oh, okay. All right, maybe we'll have to survive with the echo.
Tidak apa-apa Pak dengan adanya echo-nya itu.
Yeah, so let me continue. Allow me to continue. Yeah, my organization is in the healthcare industry, hospital group in Indonesia, with about 3,200 employees. 60% is women's. Female workers, so with a lot of challenge, of course, family and organization matters.
Dan anggota organisasinya.
And then also we have see that the mental health is very important in our organization.
Itu terjadi di organisasi kami.
So that's why we already implemented several initiatives
berbagai inisiatif
to support employee mental health.
Kesehatan mental pegawai.
We did awareness sessions to promote mental health literacy.
Kesadaran untuk mempromosikan literasi kesehatan mental.
And we do continuously training on the joy of training to build a positive workplace culture. We do also stress potential assessment to identify early sign of burnout or stress or anxiety from employees, followed by structures one-on-one coaching with the supervisor in the organization. And then if we see when needed, we can allow the employee to see professional psychology, even to the psychiatrist. So considering maybe you know the unique challenge faces by the healthcare sector in Indonesia, how do you, maybe you can share with us, how do you balance between providing meaningful psychological support and managing investment? Because if we continuously support this matter, of course, the investment and expenses will be raised and will be borne by the company. So considering of that, maybe you can share what is the common practice. My second question is, given all this effort, what else can organization like ours to do further support employee, especially in a high pressure healthcare environment, in a way that is both impactful and sustainability in terms of time and investment? Thank you.
I'm going to go to the great questions, and I'm not sure with the first question about the balancing investment. I'm not sure that I am necessarily the best person to answer that. I think that might be best answered by some of the organisations themselves. However, I will ponder that one as I'm answering the second question, if that's okay. So what else can organisations do? Can you tell me a little bit about your evaluation of the initiatives that you have implemented? Because to me, evaluation is a place to continue to adjust over time and refine so that we're actually getting the information to answer that question. And evaluation that incorporates feedback, anonymous feedback from staff and learners is really important. So can you tell me a little bit about your evaluation processes?
Okay, thank you. I will try to explain.
Saya akan mencoba untuk menjelaskan.
Yeah, first of all, as I said and I explained, we start with the session about the mental health literacy, and then we introduce about how each employee identify their problem, their trauma, their past experience, etc., and then followed by self-assessment, as you explained also about self-assessment. Self-assessment we develop in our organization, and then everybody can fill the question in the self-assessment. Based on that, we can identify and we do grouping. First is all the employees still happy and they don't have any problem about the mental health or stress potential. And then another group needs some coaching with the supervisor. And at the end is the employee identified they need some consultation with the experts, just like a psychologist or the psychiatrist. So based on this step, identification, we follow up, as I explained, by first one-on-one coaching with the supervisor. Second, we will refer to the psychologist to get more detailed consultation about their problems related mental health. Or if they need it, we will recommend also to see the psychiatrist to further medication aspect they need. So that the step we have done. So I'm just curious, is there any other step can support this to be a better organization, as you explained in this very good presentation. Thank you.
That's fabulous, and sounds very sophisticated and very thoughtful in terms of the well-being of your staff. I guess what I'm also interested in is evaluation from the perspective of the measures that you might put in place to evaluate metrics like workers' compensation or time off or staff turnover, those kinds of business-related metrics that might have been available before you implemented all of these really excellent initiatives that might give an indication of how effective these things are being. I guess that's one of the things that in that program evaluation approach can offer some insights into what would work best for your workplace, because it certainly sounds like you've got some fabulous things there, and I guess I'm just really interested in what you've seen in terms of change. What has it been effective? So you're asking that question about balancing investment versus outcomes. I'd be interested in what your evaluation is telling you about how effective that approach has been, because I think sometimes the answer to your question comes from those evaluation processes.
Yeah, I think that's really, really insightful, Leanne. And we would love to find some answers about that today, but we are running out of time.
I was just getting settled in for a really good conversation.
We will go slightly over time, and I'll ask one more question just because we have had an overwhelming number of questions in the chat. And I will reiterate that Leanne did present us with various different options to contact Phoenix Australia for further training and further support, further research opportunities as well for your organization. So if that is of interest to you, please take that up. As you can see, Phoenix Australia has extensive experience in this space, and it may well be very, very relevant to your organization. So just briefly, the last question that I will ask is from Imam Abdul Rahman from KPK and NL Jakarta. So he's asking, in Indonesia, particularly in the civil service, there are regulations stating that if an employee experiences mental health issues, a mental health examination will be conducted by the health examination team. If deemed unfit to work, the employee will be terminated from their position. So the question is, does the Australian government have similar regulations, or to what extent can they tolerate employees with mental health issues? So your insights from Australian experience.
That's such a good question. Wow. Okay. Some really different approaches there. So in the Australian context, I'm not aware of that as and something that is enforceable. I mean, working in the university environment is kind of a public sector environment. I'm not aware of that at all. I can't speak definitively about all sectors, but I don't think that's a factor for us in Australia. We have most organisations and the government will have referral pathways. So as a supervisor in the university, I have my supervisory responsibilities in my job description require that I support the mental health and wellbeing of my supervisees. You know, I have a duty of care. I'm considered to have a duty of care. I have to undergo training every year where I, amongst many other things, you know, I'm made available of the Employee Assistance Program referral options for my staff who might be experiencing difficulties. I have staff who've regularly used those. We've had conversations together about, especially during COVID, you know, that really brought things to a head and really intensified the mental health experience of staff. And it was not uncommon for me to be, I would liaise with HR about what are the things that we could do for staff. We would kind of be actively referring people to employee assistance services where they receive free mental health care for a limited number of sessions. But there was certainly there was nothing that required that they must undergo an assessment. I kind of wonder how, as somebody who has worked as a mental health clinician and done a lot of mental health assessments, I would imagine in those situations, if I was being compelled to participate in an assessment, I would not necessarily wouldn't really want to be honest. If I was really struggling under those circumstances, I don't think I'd want to be honest. I don't think I'd be forthcoming. So I would worry about how valid some of those assessments might be. Yes, so that's a roundabout way. I'm sorry I can't be definitive in terms of answering that one, but yes, that's my initial response. Yeah.
No worries, Leanne. I think it's highlighting the you know, cultural differences between Indonesia and Australia, and also just like the opportunities about how things could potentially be done differently. So thank you so much for your response for that one. So as much as we would love to keep the conversation going, we have very much run out of time, and I know that a lot of people do have to go to Salat Jumat. So that will wrap it up for today. And I want to thank Leanne and the team from Phoenix, Australia for the really excellent training session. I think you have opened up people's minds to the potential of the types of training that they could potentially experience through their different organizations. And I want to express our deepest appreciation to APINDO for this excellent collaboration. We have had an overwhelming response in terms of the number of people interested in this session. So before we go, and I know that some people do have to leave very soon, I would like to take a group photo to commemorate this session, as is customary in Indonesia. So if everybody who is online could turn on their cameras, we will take a screenshot of the first 3 pages for those who are still with us. So we will wait 10 seconds for people to do that, and then we will take our photo. Okay, people are getting online. Oh, there's so many of you still. That's so good. Okay, everybody smile. So we'll take a screenshot of the first page. So 1, 2, 3. And next, we'll take a screenshot of the second page. 1, 2, 3. And a screenshot of the third page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, hopefully we have some content from that. And we will share this with you all once we complete this session. So I want to thank everybody in the audience for participating today. As mentioned earlier, today's event is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube, so you can rewatch it if you would like to. I know there was a lot of really interesting content available in the slides that were presented. So a link will be provided to the Catalyst website and to our social media. The e-certificates will be available and will be issued within a week after this session via email. So hopefully you've filled in your details in the chat to receive that e-certificate. The next training session will take place in August, on the 20th of August at 10 a.m. Jakarta time. The topic will be on team building and will be delivered by Rapid Teams from Perth, Western Australia. Registrations are actually already open for that one. So if you would like to sign up to that to secure your spot, because spots are limited due to the overwhelming demand for these seminar series, please do register ASAP and mark your calendars. So take care for now, and we look forward to welcoming you at the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange at iaskills.org. So if your organisation would like to sign up to the platform, please do so at the link shown on your screen. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the next training session.
Zaman sekarang belajar cukup pakai jari loh.
Maksudnya?
Iya, tinggal searching kursus online aja di internet.
Tapi aku mau yang terpercaya dari Australia. Aussie, Down Under, idaman aku itu.
Pas banget, ada loh di Traveloka Experience. Tinggal pilih sesuai minat kamu, semuanya akan ada di Traveloka Experience.
Wah, udah paling bener nih.
Setelah pelatihan, kamu juga akan mendapatkan digital badge dari lembaga-lembaga Australia yang bermitra dengan Traveloka.
Dengan dukungan Katalis, meningkatkan keterampilan tidak lagi kenal batas.
Gimana? Udah nemu yang pas belum?
Pas dan tanpa batas.
So today we actually have the opening of the digital literacy training done by Catalyst and Catalyst partner TAFE Queensland and Traveloka and Universitas Ciputra.
Kita mengadakan digital literacy yang memberikan pengetahuan, keterampilan dan juga wawasan tentang keterampilan digital yang dibutuhkan di dalam pengembangan dunia pariwisata, khususnya di Jawa Timur.
And we also hope that there's a kind of engaging interaction whereby audiences or the training participant can share a candid issues in tourism industry, mostly in digital era, and we hope to have a kind of mutual solution and contribution and positive feedback after the program ends.
Menurut saya sudah tidak bisa dipungkiri lagi ya, Australia termasuk salah satu training provider yang terbaik di dunia. Harapan kami ya tetap berlanjut training tersebut, lebih ditingkatkan kualitas dan kuantitasnya.
Hi, my name is Dan Gray and I'm from TAFE Queensland, and I've flown up here to Surabaya here at the Ciputra University to run a digital literacy course. So in the digital literacy course, we are going to be covering a range of topics, including, basically digital security, digital ethics, digital marketing and onboarding, as well as a few other topics.
Ya, hari ini sangat seru banget sih.
Kemarin lihat kontennya luar biasa.
Kita bisa berbincang dengan bahasa Inggris, jadi melatih juga kita buat belajar bahasa Inggris lebih.
Ini merupakan suatu ajang yang bagus buat kami untuk bisa berjejaring.
By the end of the course, we hope that the students will really get a better understanding of the tools that are available to them and how to use them safely.
Menyala Abang Den.
Menjawab tantangan multidimensional yang dihadapi dunia usaha di tengah disrupsi dan konflik geopolitik membutuhkan sinergi dan kolaborasi kuat antar pengusaha.
Selama lebih dari 70 tahun bertransformasi, APINDO sebagai wadah kolaborasi pengusaha memegang erat 5 nilai Pancasila sebagai fondasi untuk menuju perubahan. Sebagai insan APINDO yang menjadi katalisator utama terhadap isu-isu penting yang mendukung agenda nasional dan internasional, kami terus berupaya mewujudkan iklim usaha yang kondusif, kompetitif, dan berkelanjutan untuk penciptaan lapangan pekerjaan.
Dengan mengembangkan 7 prioritas utama, APINDO terus berkomitmen memberikan pengaruh dan kontribusi yang signifikan, inklusif, serta berkelanjutan bagi roda perekonomian nasional. Dalam upaya mendorong transformasi APINDO untuk Indonesia maju, APINDO berkomitmen untuk mengembangkan 4 program unggulan, yaitu mengembangkan roadmap kebijakan ekonomi untuk panduan strategis pemerintah dalam melanjutkan reformasi struktural, mendorong pertumbuhan ekonomi yang inklusif dengan mendukung peningkatan kinerja UMKM, mereformasi kualitas SDM nasional sejak dini dengan pencegahan stunting, dan menerapkan program sertifikasi HR dan IR untuk peningkatan profesionalisme dan kualitas hubungan industrial yang dinamis.
Mari melangkah bersama untuk pengusaha bersatu Indonesia maju.
What is greatness?
It's doing what makes you feel proud. What feels right for right now. You define your greatness.
I've asked around from some people I've met on social media, Indonesian people who works in aged care nursing and also Philippine nurse. They say the work is amazing, especially when you talk to these elderly people. They're lovely, but also some also have some illness. I think that's a higher prospect of like how you take care of a patient.
So the students are studying Certificate 3 Individual Support Ageing through the University of New England Partnerships. This qualification will provide them with a skill set which will allow them to work in Australia as a personal care worker, or otherwise known as a personal care assistant. They will study subjects about communication, about diversity in culture. They will learn about manual handling. They will learn about other specific hot topics within Australia at the moment, such as dementia care and palliative care in our old persons. At the end of the qualification, they will be able to apply for positions as personal care workers in Australia with the support of our teams at UNEP.
And what we found in this process was this first batch of 20 are enthusiastic, they're eager, and they're going to make a fantastic contribution to Australia's aged care system.
Karena ini bagian dari core value dari Binawan juga ya, untuk mempersiapkan ya, menyiapkan sumber daya manusia Indonesia yang handal di bidang kesehatan. Jadi kita juga bisa bukan sekedar menyiapkan mereka dalam hal kompetensi nasional, tapi juga meningkatkan daya saing sumber daya manusia Indonesia di level global.